Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Divephoria. We are...
Hello.
It's only my second episode, and Kobe's too, actually.
Hello and welcome to my third episode of Divephoria, the second episode for both Kobe and Azael, as they were not here for round 1, and they missed out because that's when G2 was undefeated and not an absolute free fall.
They're not in free fall anymore.
Free fall.
We put a stop to the free fall.
What can't NA do?
Right, we beat PSG for you.
Beat G2, yes. Sucks. Luckily not your best of 5 opponent, so we'll see. Or maybe unluckily, I don't know. I have to see how it works out.
Why not both?
That's true.
Yeah.
We'll work on it. Maybe finals. Meet you there.
See you there. See you there. This time around, it won't be the fastest best of 5 in international history. That's our new goal.
Yeah.
Personal best.
Personal best.
It's good to have aspirations, but also to be realistic.
It's about setting small goals, not the big picture. It's the day-to-day goals that keep the people going. So we just finished Rumble yesterday. We are recording this on the Wednesday. Presumably to come out on the Thursday, and Friday is when it all starts
what
again.
Comes afterwards?
2 semifinals. Then Saturday. And kids, if you've been following along, what comes after Saturday? That's right. It's Sunday. Big finals between
Sunday.
Kids seats cost an unknown amount of Korean won. I don't know how much they cost, but $5 in the US if you're going to see Gravedigger. Do you guys not remember that as ads? That's what that's from.
Well, I know
that's
the
Sunday.
Yeah.
Gravedigger.
I remember Gravedigger. I just didn't remember the cost of the tickets.
The kids, that was like the big thing. That's the thing that the guy said. Other than Sunday was that kids seats are still just $5.
You can take your kids when their hearing is like really
tuned
sensitive.
out after the third
Monster
Sunday.
Truck Rally, so they have permanent hearing damage for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, but they'll get to watch Truckosaurus eat a car, Isaac.
And for $5.
And for
you
$5.
Can't beat that.
That's true. I would, I'd pay $5 to watch that. Certainly more than I would want to watch G2 lose 5 games in a row. I'm hurt, guys. I don't know if you can tell.
You actually got paid to watch G2 lose 5 games in a row.
Actually,
that's true.
Can't complain too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, okay, I take it back. That's a
your job,
dark
turns
realization.
out.
Yeah. Wow. Didn't know that was a kink. There it is. Here we are. I'm here for the pain. I'm here for the suffering. If you missed Rumble, just really quick to recap the standings. RNG finished in first seed, 8-2. T1 7-3. G2 and EG both at 5-5, with G2 owning the head-to-head, so finishing in third as opposed to EG finishing in fourth.
Yeah, just slightly owning the head.
Just a little bit. Technically, only 2.
I'm not sure. I think we need another data point.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why we're going to be in the finals.
Best of 13 is
So
really what we're working
in
towards.
boxing they have the rope-a-dope strategy where you're just taking a bunch of punches. We were in the middle of that strategy versus G2.
G2's tired.
Now we don't get to play them any more games. It's like, what the hell? That was our whole strategy. You were punching yourself out.
It was good strategy too.
Yeah, for the best of 13 for the 13
G2
rounds
is feeling
of boxing.
comfortable.
You know who got to reap the rewards? PSG.
Oh God,
PSG reaped the rewards of our rope-a-dope
It's
strategy.
like when you're opening up like a really tight jar, and you're struggling, but they hand it someone else. But you did most of the work.
You softened it up.
Exactly.
Yeah, your hands are just tired now.
G2 was looking soft.
we were about to pop that.
I mean, we can start on any of these teams. PSG Talon 3-7, Saigon Buffalo 2-8. They were out before they won any games, but they had 2 pretty fantastic upsets to watch. One over G2.
Yeah, honestly, the last 2 days from the Saigon Buffalo were so exciting to watch.
Yeah.
I think we should start with them because full credit to these guys. This is the average youngest team at the tournament. Or youngest average age. That sounds better. But they really did show like there's a lot of room for this team. I feel like they have a very bright future ahead of them. Even the members of the team that were getting the most criticism, like Froggy, stepped up with some of the biggest plays. With all of these charm flashes, just boom, 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 making huge picks for them and getting themselves some upsets at the end of MSI, I think bodes really well for Worlds, where we not only, because they have 2 seats for Vietnam, we not only are assuming we're probably going to get GAM that time around, since they dominated so hard, but I would say Buffalo as well have a very good shot to be the second representative and get another round at it.
Yeah, I mean, my question is definitely like how much better is GAM going to look, right? Because I think a lot of people are coming away and being like, hey, like SGB, especially second round robin, looked pretty competitive. how much better would GAM have performed? Would they actually be in the top 4? Would they have knocked out, G2 or EG or whoever, right? And actually be that much better? Because the region obviously has a huge player base. I think it's actually the second largest player base now out of any region, which is pretty crazy. Like League is just exploding in popularity. So it's going to be exciting to see how they actually perform at Worlds, if they are, another real big threat.
I want to see VCS out of groups. And I think it's still hard. I think it still requires a favorable group draw for either. At this point, we're assuming it's just going to be GAM and Saigon Buffalo, but obviously we'll have to wait and see what happens domestically. But I still think I would love to see these teams make it to best of 5 because it feels like they are of that caliber. How they will fare, because they held their own against first seeds in some of these games. And some of the games weren't as good, weren't as clean. But as they were ramping up, once you did finally see Froggy step up, once you did finally see Bay step up even on the PCS side, you had a lot of good mid laners stepping up these last few days. I feel like they can go toe-to-toe. How they fare against second and third seeds, I'm not sure. Because if I look at EU sent some pretty suspect third seeds or suspect fourth seed in the case of the Mad Lions.
The fourth seed was definitely
NA has sent some suspect third seeds. So
we've always gotten out of play-ins easy peasy.
That's true.
Every single time that we have someone in play-ins, they're first in their group and they get out.
That I wasn't. Yeah, I meant more in the group part of the third seed thing. But
sure.
You're right.
We've also sent a suspect first seed to Worlds.
True. So my TLDR.
Broken Blade was there.
We sent some sleepers, some 9-person sleep action going on.
If you want to know what Broken Blade's TSM run looked like, you don't actually need to go back and watch that.
No.
You can just watch the G2 run up until the last.
I mean,
game.
He was almost the 2-time.
He could have been the 2-time.
He could have been the 2-time.
06 king.
Yeah.
What's his thing that he does with his hands now? It's like
kind of finger guns, but not really finger guns.
I think it's very intentionally not, super spread, and so it's more like some fan
finger
stuff.
Scissors.
It's you know what it is? It's Camille versus Gwen, the top lane matchup.
You can't. Kobe has made 2 hand scissors and they are fighting, and he's making
one
the
are
point.
legs.
One are legs.
Legs,
You have blade legs.
Thank
Blade
you.
legs. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I forgot.
But yeah, no, I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, as far as expectations at Worlds for VCS, I think getting into groups is actually so hard. I don't even think there is that good of a draw anymore because there's 4 LPL and 4 LCK seeds.
That's true.
Ever since they did that, this ooh, great, you gotta get a really good draw, doesn't really exist anymore at Worlds because there's 2 teams to get from groups, and there's 2 Asian representatives in every single group, right? There's going to be an LPL and LCK in every group, unless they somehow get knocked out or whatever early. But I do think it's just really, really difficult. Ever since they changed that format, it's made it harder for everyone, I think, to get into groups. Of course, the 4th seed and stuff for LCK and for LPL is not going to be favored over top EU teams or whatever, right? So you're still expecting more teams to get out. But we saw even last year, it was really close to it being just 8 LPL and LCK teams.
Yeah, super duper close. And that's a really good point. That's something that I think I kind of forget about is that you're right, that the idea of a good group draw is not entirely dead. You certainly can have a more favorable group draw.
A 4th seed.
But there's no group of life anymore, I think, compared to what we have seen in past years.
I will say that this year has felt really winnable in all of these games. So the mystique of, oh no, LCK seed, LPL seeds in my group,
especially with
feels very, very doable. Yeah, and especially as you're going further down the list. I think so. I think EG, especially this tournament, has I think accomplished the goals that they set out with learning at this tournament and improving and and teaching the younger players, and also shown, especially on the first day with G2 beating both T1 and RNG. I'm not actually too frightened of Worlds becoming this, 8 teams of LCK, LPL.
I think in this context, it's just
for
VCS and seeing how high really VCS can go.
I mean, I think GAM is really going to impress. Yeah, of course that it is going to be a long shot, but I think GAM. I'm so ready to re-embrace GAM because when we saw them before Vietnam had to go 2 years without international events, they were on course for straight up getting through and breaking out.
I feel like GAM is that friend with the really crazy life, and you're where have you been for 6 months? He's like, bro, I've been around the world. I
was living on an island.
Yeah, I like joined like this
hunting
Krav
sharks.
Maga class. I went to Thailand, learned Thai, and you're like, damn, bro, like where have you been? Like come back, he's like buff and tan. And I feel like that's Gam right now. We're just waiting for that friend to come back from their like crazy world excursion to return, and we're gonna be like, you're doing what now? And they're like, oh yeah, we got the Nocturne to level 6 even faster.
We're beating
this time.
RNG. We're getting a 3-minute level 6 for Nocturne.
Yeah, it's just working on us. You know, it's just like I'm ready for that return. And I think the big thing is like talking about small goals, like not the fastest final goal, obviously being a meme, but I think for VCS, like passing the PCS, and this is something that I know that other people have talked about, and I don't know these regions well enough to do that story justice, but I will say that VCS feel like they are on the cusp, especially because their second seed is only one win behind the first seed of the PCS in surpassing PCS, former LMS as a region. And I think that is a big deal for VCS in Vietnam, because now it's like, especially with that server player base you talked about, I'm curious to see what the next 3 years look like. The next 4 years look like.
I would be willing to bet VCS places higher than PCS at Worlds.
I would think so too.
I would bet that.
Yeah. And I mean, it is really exciting to think, like in 3 years and 5 years, right? It was like, to me, it always felt almost inevitable that the LPL would become better than the LCK, because it's like, you just have so many more players. It's a massive
It's a numbers game, baby.
and it's like, of course you can improve your scouting, you can improve your coaching. Like that's, I think something that NA obviously, is working on, needs to work on, and that's definitely true. But when you have a much smaller player base, there's just less to pull from. So VCS, if they can, work on the infrastructure, if they're, getting that investment in 3-5 years, who's to say that they won't be, entering the top 4, passing NA
we'll
or
look
whoever.
back on the days where we used to take games off the VCS before they went up there with Korea and China and just punched down on us.
I mean, for the LPL over LCK story, like that is still so recent too. This was the first finals of only LPL players in their finals not having Korean imports, because they were heavily Korean imports in all of the best LPL teams for so long.
Yep.
So I think that was a big moment, and that was just this year. So I mean, that's a very real ongoing story as well still.
Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, Suning and like some of the teams in the past had like full Chinese teams and stuff, but yeah, I mean, traditionally the big winners had always been the solo lanes were Korean imports, right, for China. Yeah. So it'll be really exciting to see how they develop, maybe move on to PSG a bit, who I think it was like, it's interesting because coming into Rumble, almost everyone I talked to kind of had them ranked below SGB, right? Everyone was thinking that they were actually going to be kind of the easy team. A lot of people were like, they're even going to get a win. They did end up performing, I think, a lot better than people expected. Again, I think it's just really hard for both these teams. I felt like, yes, their players stepped up, but mid jungle was the big weakness for both these teams, I think, overall, right? And it's interesting to see, because we know that like Unified and Kaiwing, I think, can perform to the level that it's kind of needed to really compete against some of these big squads. Bay and Juhan, they had a bit of a rougher tournament. Binjay and Froggy had a bit of a rougher tournament. They did have those kind of glimpses where they had some really good performances, but that to me was like the main thing keeping them away from going even further. And that's kind of what they were lacking compared to last year, where they've lost a lot of their big players. They've lost a lot of their big stars, but it was still great to see them be able to compete against G2 and win both games against G2. I thought there was no shot they were going to win the second one, because I thought G2 was going to like really change up how they were drafting and go like full on 5v5, because that seemed to be the way that PSG kind of had to win. But G2 didn't really do that, and PSG played really well in both those games.
Well, yeah, and I think just to double down on what you said, I generally looked at the mid jungle for the PCS and the VCS and was just underwhelmed. And I know, doubling up on that for the PCS, there were also communication issues that the team had talked about, and that was a struggle. But it did feel like once they kind of simplified what they wanted to do and they played together, like Juhan and Bay looked so much better. And those were not the same players, and this was not the same team that we saw in stage 1. And that was so big that they developed so quickly, because we've seen across this tournament in a very big way, whether it be EG, VCS or PCS teams, ultimately like a lot of teams growing very quickly in what is actually a very, very short tournament.
Yeah. I also do think, we should point out the gameplay mistakes that led to these. Like, draft is one thing, but I think the bigger, more obvious issues were so many of these Rift Herald fights. A single member like Yankos goes up, tries to poppy eject one person and then sneak around for an eyeball hit and a steal. Oh, they lose a whole bunch there. And then, next play, the coordination is gone. Targamas is up there overextended and he's getting picked off. some of these things, the cracks showing in a lot of the Pool 1 seeds, and it wasn't just, G2, T1 as well, leaving these openings, really adds to the factor and builds this story to me of like, wow, these games are winnable, because there have been times in the past,
Except for RNG.
Except for RNG.
I don't know. It's given at least for me. RNG have also made big blunders.
They have.
You feel like
Very few though, I think.
I feel like people are waxing over some of them because of the end game scores and them being 8-2. But there have been some very big blunders where you're like, wow, that could be.
T1 RNG series was absolutely a miss.
I mean, that one had the most. That was plentiful.
Yeah,
A bounty.
But yeah, there have been so many more. Transitions where there's a teleport way over aggressive, or an objective swap or something like that, where I'm like, wow, this is really winnable. But I'm comparing this to times in the past as someone who lived through all of the competitive League of Legends all the way up to 2018. It was like suffocating, and you didn't go into international tournaments with those types of hope. And now I feel like.
Feel a bit more hopeful.
I do.
Yeah. And I'll say that I think that like the thing is like it's really easy. I think ultimately when a team wins a game, most of us are just inclined to gloss over the mistakes, and definitely the audiences too. Because remember, we went through the biggest whiplash of fan expectations in this tournament from the G2 4-0 to 0-2 to 0-4.
Best team in the world, worst team in the world.
They were literally the best team in the world for 2 days. And it was literally like you watch them lose early games, and then it was like, oh, they found a way back. They found a crazy team fighting because G2 are winning, and obviously we're on an EU time zone. So as far as English fan interaction goes, you got a lot of EU fans here. And I was on the hype train too. I was like, I thought they were going to get blasted. They were losing early game. They came back in a miracle fight. I'm like, they're the best team in the world. Screw it. They're the best team in the world. And then instantly it's like, oh yeah, they suck now. And I think it's easy to do the same thing for RNG, to be like, they're clear number one team. That's undisputable coming out of this Rumble stage. A lot due to their consistency. But yeah, they were not infallible. Sad Ox is in here to give a spiel on Way Volibear. But like, there's a lot of suspect plays across the board. And this is not... I'm curious if this is...
Do we want to jump to the top, or should we just keep going?
I was going to say, should we focus this in matchups that we're going to see now? And
sure, we can. Let's just finish on the bottom too.
Yeah.
If you guys have anything more for PSG. Otherwise, we can go to matchups. We can talk retroactively about that.
I'll just say I'm excited to see how the PCS and the VCS develop moving forward. I think that it would be interesting to me if the MSI format changes, and obviously... we don't know what's going to happen with that. But I would be curious to see, like, I would expect at least the VCS to always be considered a Pool 1 seed in Stage 1 at a minimum. And if they're going to split it out into play-ins again, I would be wondering if VCS and PCS, at least one of those regions, would still have to fight through. Because I think that they are... My expectation would be they would always make it out of play-ins. I think they are just a cut above.
I mean, I think I would kind of expect, their number one seed to start in pools, and that's usually what it had been in the past. So I'm not sure exactly how the format is shaking out with VCS being away, because obviously the calculations are based on the last couple of years. It feels a little bit unfair to like give you a did not finish or whatever score for VCS. Yeah. So my assumption is we would use the previous scores from where they could attend. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But anyway, we'll find out more about Worlds when Worlds does come. Both teams, though, had some exciting moments. We could start on EG RNG because that's the Friday match, and then we can jump into the next one.
So reminder that RNG had the choice between G2 and EG as first seed. They got to pick between third and fourth. They could not pick T1, and they did pick EG, just for people who are not familiar how this selection works.
And honestly, even if G2 lost and we're on 6-game losing streak, I was still kind of thinking that RNG might just choose EG because let's be honest, like, G2 just has so much more international history, right? Like EG has never been there, right? They do have some players with experience, like Vulcan has had some good performances. Impact is obviously the big guy internationally. Inspired has a little bit of history, but it's like compared to G2 as an organization, I think that's nothing. G2 also did beat them in groups.
I think it's as simple as that. Like they beat us. EG has never beaten us, so.
The one thing I will say that was giving me some kind of like hope was that I have heard from a couple of people that EG actually has a winning record against RNG and scrims. So I was like, hey, maybe they won't get picked. Maybe they'll care about scrims. But after EG lost to G2, I thought there was no shot of it.
Yeah.
As an NA fan, of course, I wanted to dodge RNG. I just think they look way more solid than T1. So I do think it's the much harder matchup currently. Of course, we don't know what form teams are going to bring out in the knockout stage. But like the thing is, yes, RNG did make mistakes, but I would also say most of their big mistakes were earlier in the stage. And I think that I watched a lot of RNG this year. I've watched probably, 30 games or something, like, a good amount. And I always felt like the big weaknesses that you could point to were Bin playing too aggressive, like he's very punishable. And then Wei really did have a lot of up and down games, right? Like one out of, 4 games, 3 games, whatever it was, one out of every so many often like games, he would be doing these plays like invades that are really punishable and risky without his lanes pushed up, or he would just be going for like these crazy engages that he has no business going for, and he would just like have these kind of int games. Wei was really consistent, I felt like, pretty much across the whole stage, which feels like, okay, well, that's a lot less exploitable. You can still maybe point to Bin, like we saw in the final game of groups, the T1 RNG game. Bin did get picked on a little bit by Owner, and I think that was a big part of T1 winning, was T1 kind of got to play both sides of the map. They got to actually, be up in gold and get dragons because Bin kept dying on top side because of some really good ganks and good play with Zeus, of course, as well. But overall, it was like, After that one really memeable game, the Camille game that was really bad, he was playing he wasn't even playing Knight on Gwen anymore. He was playing Ghost, and he was playing Exhaust, and he was playing way more respectful in lane. And the rest of the team is just like really, really good and hard to see holes in for Xiaohu and Gala and Ming. So it's tough to like point at one thing and be like, well, here's their mistakes, exploit them. You kind of just have to have everyone play really well to stand a chance.
I'm still pointing at Bin and Wei. If you remember back to the first game versus G2 also.
Yeah, the early games, but the last 8 in a row, it felt like they were pretty bulletproof.
Yeah, but Xiaohu, Gala, and Ming have literally been bulletproof the whole time. So you still point at the same place.
They're still your best hope. I agree.
Like those three have been absolutely clean the entire way for me. Yeah. Ming especially, and we've been trying to really highlight the supports here. Ming has been incredibly good. So many small plays. Also, there's so many times where you watch these other teams, and Vulcan or Targamas or somebody is getting caught out going to an objective or getting vision. Guess what? You don't have any of those moments from Ming because his timings are so more well coordinated with the rest of the team. And in the moments that he does get caught out by an ability, he's like buffering Nautilus hook into the wall to pull himself back, and then he doesn't die. And it's so many of these non-death moments that are, to me, like pretty big highlights from him. And then, of course, Gala and Xiaohu have been
fighting is just like
absolutely insane carries.
Yeah, and I think the big thing for me is that it would be one thing if Gal and Ming were great and like every other bot lane was performing. I'd be like, okay, let's see how this is going to shape up. But
everybody else, you're like,
what the hell? You've got these great Flak and Targa games. You've got these horrible Flak and Targa games. These Kalista games. And even Guma Keria, who I thought would be the undisputed #1 bot lane coming into this tournament. Keria's been good.
Is that
Guma's
the biggest?
Been shaky.
Yeah. So that's got to be the biggest flop. And in the past, I don't know if newer listeners, I don't know if newer listeners are familiar with the Dade Award, but Monte Cristo actually started it a super long time ago with Dade, who is a player who was super hyped up going in an international event, then giant flop. And so this is basically expectations that have flopped the hardest and no contest.
It's Guma Yushi.
It has to go to
Guma for sure.
But at the very least, he did start performing a lot better towards the end groups, and we'll get more on him, when we do the next matchup. But it's going to be interesting. Like when I think about holes for Xiaohu, there was the one game Caps was really gapping him in lane, but even then, it's like Caps did that to a lot of people. I'm not sure Jojo can replicate that. Yeah. Unless he wants to do something like I feel like for EG to have a chance here, my head is this is an RNG 3-0. My heart is that hey, maybe there's an opportunity if you can really have some great prep, right? And you have the kind of copium of TL did it against IG, right?
Series win?
Series win.
How big is your heart? Okay, good. There's a whole series. That's what I want.
That's what my heart always wants.
That's what I want.
Right? Yeah. And we saw TL. They went 4-6 in groups, didn't look very good, and then beat IG. It can happen, but you have to be really intelligent about your prep, right? And I think everyone is looking at Galio as like, okay, must ban. But I wonder, hey, maybe it's worth going into game 1, leaving Galio up, and then like going Lucian mid or something like that to really go aggressive and try to blast what RNG has shown as their kind of preferences. We know that Kai'Sa is going to be picked. Maybe you can just blow it out of the water with like, I don't know, Caitlyn Lux or some, like you have to have some sort of prep. I think that is going to get you an advantage to prey on RNG's tendencies because they are creatures of habit. They like to go to their specific picks. I think if you can't do that, it's going to be very, very difficult.
It's also hard because, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, I feel like you're like, bring something different. Is there anything from their like domestic history they're like, oh, I think they could bust this out against the way that RNG like to play? Because I'm in a similar boat right now with G2 where I'm thinking about like, what do I want to see from G2? And the only really great thing I have is the same fallback they've always had. Not to segue too much, it's like Broken Blade Ornn, obviously very memeable point at this point. It's like hyper carry bot lane.
I'd say Senna lanes that I haven't played at all.
Okay.
For me, I want to actually attack jungle camps. I want to attack because if you start taking away Wei's camps, then he gets mad and he comes to your side of the map and maybe you can get some trap kills. So I feel like targeting actually not even a specific lane. Yeah, it'll be based on your draft for each game, but targeting jungle camps for Inspired because Inspired has been so consistent at getting farm leads in the jungle. Mm-hmm. He has not ganked as much as Jankos, and Jankos has had some of the most creative and most influential early ganks, but Inspired has consistently had these level lead, whatever amount of CS over the other jungle. So if you start to slowly build those jungle advantages early in the game, what it does to the other jungler is they start to feel this pressure to force plays and force things. And especially if you do have some outlets on your team, like Bin is always going to be playing aggressive. So I feel like there are some things that could come loose if you put pressure points on jungle.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. Like, obviously, you have to get pushing lanes and win your lanes to be able to kind of safely do that, right? To enable Inspired to do it.
Or just find the timing windows. Like, you don't have to have a universally winning lane as long as your timing window works out.
Yeah. I just say if you want to like constantly be in their jungle, right? Yeah. And as far as like your question of examples, Jojo Pian literally did Lucian and lane swap to top to beat a Gangplank, right? Like that was one of the things that was against Team Liquid, right? Against
and their lane swap versus G2 when they counter with the Jax and everything was that the lane swap was good.
G2 lane swapped.
Yeah, but we swapped the Galio into support to force them to lane swap.
Yep.
So our swap, forcing them to lane swap, got us better matchups.
Yep.
So both of our solo lane matchups won. Of course.
Well, the mid lane matchup
mid lane matchup he won for sure.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that's the matchup that like G2 wanted.
But we won it. Jojo won it.
I guess he was a little bit ahead. Top lane went really well for us.
It is so much better to have Jax Tryndamere in mid lane, and he was able to get his CS lead.
Short lane was nice.
Yeah.
So it was a beneficial situation to us. That's why they kept the Tryndamere mid even with the swap from G2. Mm-hmm. So like that was good. Of course we lost the game, and we weren't able to execute.
And sadly, but the Galio you paid the price with the Galio. Yeah. The Galio did very little that game.
Well, honestly, and I liked the mid lane matchup like more for G2 because I just feel like Jax outscales in that matchup, and it's really hard to punish Jax. I feel like it matters more that the Jax is staying relevant than the Tryndamere, because the Tryndamere like needs to play from really ahead.
I thought Jojo is doing really well in it though. Burning Flash.
He totally did well early, and he got a solo kill and stuff.
I think
he was playing well, and G2 I think just did a really good job playing around Broken Blade and like coming in and actually keeping him relevant. And then like once he hits a certain point, once Jax has armor, you like don't win that matchup anymore. When Jax is on 2 items with Frozen Heart, unless Tryndamere's way ahead, it just becomes like unwinnable. So that's why I think G2 did lane swap and put Caps in a bad matchup.
Yeah, but so you're comparing that to having the normal Caps game and having the mid lane guarantee.
Well, I'm just comparing Jax and Tryndamere mid lane towards Jax and Tryndamere top, and I just think it's better for the Jax side to be playing that mid lane than it is to be playing a top lane. And I mean, Broken Blade even said like that's why they did it.
I know that they wanted to put it so they could keep that matchup 1v1, but I think it is better and it definitely turned out better for us because then your Gwen is so far behind, and it was a really good final Kennen pick because you're gonna win either side.
Yeah, the Kennen was great for sure,
and the Tryndamere I think was a win in the mid.
Mm-hmm. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But I mean, there's examples of EG obviously getting pretty creative with draft. And I do think that there's potential to gain some advantages there. But at the end of the day, like they're just going to have to play at a really high level to actually have a chance. And I will say that like while EG had an awful record against like the major regions, right? If you're kind of like 0-6 versus G2, we went 0-2 versus RNG. We got one win, against T1. Obviously, if you're just looking at like, Rumble stage only, it looks a little bit better. They were competitive in a lot of those games, but they couldn't close them out, right? Yeah. And I do think that they're going to need to kind of like step up to a higher level. They have been improving, and I think people have been pretty positive on that. I think top side of the map, especially like JoJo, Inspired, and Impact, I think have been really good overall. Of course, there's things you can point to. But I still do think like Vulcan and Danny really need to have like a very, very good series for us to have a chance at winning.
It was a interesting thing because I think Danny had some rougher games earlier on, but then Vulcan had a lot of the rougher games towards the later half. But it feels like in a tournament full of bot lanes that will and can potentially 2v2 kill you or die in the process, like it's a rough time to struggle. And definitely like you had a lot of hooks missing for Vulcan. Sometimes they didn't matter as much. Sometimes it was fine that he missed the hooks. You had a lot of questionable Galio plays, and I think it's one of those things. And the Galio ones I kind of forgive because I'm not sure how ready he was to play that matchup.
I thought his mechanics were pretty clean on the Galio. I'm gonna be honest.
He backwards one. I mean, I'm actually more mad. So sorry. I'm mad at Targa.
The E buffer as well though. Like actually, like he was like proccing his aftershock as he was getting hooked in and stuff.
What mattered to me more though is I was looking at that game and. Well, yes, you're going to have, Jax has possibilities of scaling super well for later for splitting.
Oh, we're off the Galio.
We're off the Galio.
No, I'm on, we're on the Galio. This is a Galio point.
Okay.
All he needed to do was do a good Galio R, and their entire team is short range melee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And their first R was on this chase where they're chasing the Tryndamere, and there's no way that G2 are going to kill this Tryndamere, and they use the Galio ultimate under their own tower.
Yeah, that's fair.
So while his in lane was good, what you needed for us to win that game was a good Galio ultimate with all of these melee carries that G2 have.
Yeah. And I felt like Tryndamere needed to also just get like way more ahead, and maybe that is the Galio putting him ahead. But it was like G2 just ran us around the map in that game, right? Like with double TP, and then it was like they were so good at actually punishing TP, and it felt like Impact had this massive lead, and then he has to be the guy who's like win the game. So he's like running around trying to help everyone everywhere, and then every time he TP'd, again they talked about it in the interview after. It's like they just track one TP, and then as soon as he TP's anywhere, they're Nocturne ulting on you on the other side of the map, and Impact can't help, right? Yeah. And G2 just like played the map so well.
Yeah, we did. We're just reliving this whole game because I remember the moment where I was like, because we need that big team fight with the AoE Galio ultimate on the melees, and I was like, it was there in the jungle, and we missed the small window.
Yeah. To me, like the criticisms that I have for Vulcan, I'm less concerned about like a missed hook or whatever, because I think mechanically he's a good player. The thing that stood out in a negative way for me was just like when he's going for vision, he had like some really poor timings.
That Leona game,
and that was like he had a number of games and a number of times where he just kind of like wandered in without a jungler behind him and without like vision on people, without the lanes fully pushed up. Like they just didn't have the proper setup. Like you're saying, you don't always need to have pushing lanes, but you need to have the right timings. And at times it felt like he was looking for rewards at bad times and got picked. And EG very frequently got punished when that did happen. Like often in these close games, maybe you're a little bit behind, Vulcan gets picked, now they're all of a sudden they're at Baron or they're doing something big off of that. So that is definitely going to need to clean up because LPL will punish you if you ever step out of position.
Well, and I think the thing that's so terrifying is that we're talking about like getting through the lane phase, finding a lead in the early game against RNG, who again, in the context of this tournament, have had solid early games, but domestically are the mid game, late game kings. Yeah. And that's what's horrifying. It's like even if you do find that pick, find that edge early game, you have to play so flawlessly to actually close a game versus RNG. And I think that's why I don't think G2 can beat RNG from what we've seen in a best of 5. It would take a miracle turnaround. I don't think EG. I think that they probably right now, and obviously a lot can change in best of 5s, are my clear favorites to win this tournament because they are so good at that part of the game. And unless every other team steps up their early game to the point where, like, when we saw T1 was able to close a game, like, it is a possible thing. G2 was able to take a game, like, it is possible, but it just feels taking 3 games against RNG. Like,
well, none of us is predicting EG to win this series.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, like, that, like, because I don't want this to be like, because I think EG have ramped up a ton in this tournament. You know what I mean? And I just want to make it clear, like, how titanic an opponent RNG is. Because I feel like EG have gotten probably more than their fair share of shit for especially how good they have ramped up over the second half of this
Here's
tournament.
my two hopeful aspirations. I hope that we have prepared for this 5-on-5. One is that Peter Dunn gave an interview where he said they were still hiding some things. So I'm hoping we have some exciting, champion combinations or strategies that they're going to show. And the other one is I hope we invest heavily in level ones, because level ones can have a huge snowball effect. And especially for best of 5 series, it can help shift the way that the draft ping pong goes. Flipping back from red to blue side. So
Senate drafts.
It'll be really interesting, man. Like I'm hopeful that we do have those crazy picks that we're gonna come out within game 1, and then if that doesn't work, I feel like you actually draft full late game for 5v5 and pray that works, because the tournament has been so much about team fighting. I don't think you want to just AFK and play passive because you're just going to get rolled over. But like if the aggressive counter picks, if the creative stuff fails, I do think there's a lot to be said for going like, yes, you still have some proactivity with your jungle mid, but you go Ornn top, you draft team fighting AD carry, and you just hope that you're better set up for when you get to the 5v5, right?
I just feel like Ornn is the savior of the
Ornn
West.
is the savior, man.
Spoiler, when we get to G2, I'm probably saying the same exact shit.
It's funny because it's just like you can't really say that like super over indexing early game is the way to beat RNG, because they are so good in the later stages, and like Top was that team. Top was the like early game crazy team and got big advantages against them in early games in a bunch of games that they lost.
Well, EG was the pentakill Baron steal team.
There you go. So we just have to get them to go to Baron and pick Jinx.
We're not early game. We're wait till later, get some pentakills at Baron.
And there's some really good interviews. You guys should for sure watch. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but at home as well. Impact did an interview with Ashley Kang that is by far, it's not close to the best interview I've ever heard from Impact. And it does make me like, I just don't even think about language barrier sometimes, because it's like Impact has been in Ace for so long and he does have really good English. Yeah. But like, man, he was so thoughtful and introspective and had a really great mindset about the game. And just like, he was able to go much more in depth, I think, because he was speaking his native language. And I'm just like, damn, you can see why this guy is like a 10-year veteran still performing well on the international level. He is smart as hell. And, he was really honest about like, things that his feelings in the games and things that he thought they messed up and what they're doing wrong. He talked a lot about how he thought they were missing opportunities to fight. There was one game, specifically the first game against T1. This is gonna be verbatim. I'm gonna exactly quote him because I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. So again, one time, Ashley Kang Horizon is the YouTube channel if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, and she tweeted it out as well. I retweeted it. It's with interview with Impact. It's wonderful. But yeah, he was talking specifically about like how he had an earlier reset and he had the push early on top, and basically like he just like wanted to like force Herald on this timing where like he had the advantage top, and he was saying that like basically the team, I don't know, wanted to like reset or wanted to hit certain item spikes or whatever it was. Basically they just didn't want to fight at that moment, and then he's like, okay, that's fine. And then they reset, and then it's like T1 is already doing it, and now it's too late, right?
Yeah.
And in that game, he said they missed their window to go for it. Then Owner takes Herald, comes top, he gets killed, and then the full tower is down, and he was basically like, well, now it's GG, right? Because now the side lane is completely over.
Yeah.
And so though EG have played aggressive, he still felt that they were sometimes missing these windows where it's like they should be contesting and they should be more confident. He talks a lot about, like maybe some of the younger players are feeling nervous and stuff, and, with Danny and JoJo. And he also said that like some of the EG guys had said that like Zeus's hands were like shaking when they were doing the handshake after. Like clearly it's happening not just on the EG side, it's happening on the T1 side as well.
It's a lot of pressure to jump onto the international stage, and obviously
to wear the T1 jersey.
To wear the T1 jersey, even just an EG jersey. I mean, JoJo and Danny, and don't get me wrong, again, they are both rookies, but like watching your guys' playoffs, and that's most of what I watch, right? And then like young NA talent, like I am as much guilty as a lot of people are of like probably overhyping these guys, because I was obviously I still want G2 to beat them, but I'm like, this is so freaking cool for NA because it feels like the first time in a long time.
17, 18.
Yeah, that you've got young, I'm already doing it again. I'm like prodigy level NA talent, which is unfair.
We've got two fakers on one team.
Yeah, in the context of North America, that is true. But then we come onto the international stage, and people are just ready to shoot these guys down because people like me and our video
literally
team,
Faker and Uzi on one team.
I think the problem is it's deserving of hype to have super young NA talent be successful.
But it adds
the
pressure.
second part, though, where people, and you're doing it jokingly here, but you're like faker level that sort of stuff. That sort of
why would you
stuff
say that, Drakos?
was not. That sort of stuff was not propagated, and it just kind of swarmed in from other voices. It got muddied, where it was like, okay, it's supposed to be all this hype for finally successful young North American talent, and then that gets stretched to infinity when it's like, oh, so you're saying these guys are insane fakers, already.
In order for you to take pride in your region, they have to be better than fakers.
Look
Kobe.
at the mid laners that Jojo Pion, the 17-year-old, has to play. It's literally 3 of the best mid laners the game has ever seen.
Oh.
You have probably, I would argue, the most iconic mid laner from all 3 of the biggest regions.
Yeah.
Right? You have Caps, Xiaohu, and Faker.
I think the only person who even comes close at that point is Rookie, but obviously Rookie. Yeah, that's the only other one. But it's still 3 of the most, right?
Yeah, Rookie is totally a fair argument. I guess it depends.
It doesn't really matter.
But
ultimately,
anyway,
it's 3 of the most.
3 of the best ever, right? So it's like, did I expect Jojo to get outperformed? Yeah. Did he get outperformed? Yeah, but not by as much as I thought. Like, I thought he did really, really well. Like, he was competitive in a lot of these games. He played really well. And even speaking to some of the people on EG, something that was really cool was in the T1 win, apparently Jojo Pion was doing most of the shot calling. Like, he was the one actually like directing the team, so to speak. And I was told, calming people down and helping to plug gaps, right? And when his side lanes are struggling, apparently a lot of the reason that he's been playing like Ryze and TF and Galio is to give up his own his own agency to help side lanes, because it's like, and that not only shows maturity, but it's incredible that you can play more of like a so-called utility pick and not just get absolutely trounced at this level against those guys. So like everything I hear, I'm just like, I'm excited for the future.
I wanted to bring this up after you were talking about the interview with Impact, because Jojo gave the interview with Lore right after the game, where he also cited wanting to go for more of these plays. Yeah. And the verbiage that he used was also the team. And then she followed up, about his age and stuff. And he was like, well, I don't want to say me, because like he wanted to be aggressive. So he had a similar view to Impact in that he also thought that they missed some of these aggressive opportunities. And he was pushing for them too.
And I think the big thing is it's like, I'm sure in hindsight, everyone is like, damn, we should have gone for this. And it's cool to hear that both those guys are so vocal about wanting to be more aggressive. But it is like, this is the thing about high level League of Legends and why it's so beautiful to watch teams who are insanely good at League. It's like, you see the choreographed perfect recall timings as Herald's about to respond. You see like the perfect movement, and it's like this beautiful chess game unfolding for you. But it is to coordinate that, to be comfortable where everybody knows at the same time, and it can also take into account their own needs, their own back timers. Because they could have, like, let's say their waves are perfectly even, they back early and they don't have their items, they could just get smashed by T1 there. Like, it is such an architectural effort to like make those moments happen cleanly and effortlessly in a game in a way that you probably haven't had to do domestically to be successful.
That was another thing that I really liked that Impact said. Because he basically got asked something along the lines of like, oh, is there a reason why some of these teams that are known for being aggressive, or players that are known for being aggressive, aren't being as aggressive? He's like, well, they're playing against better players, and better players don't. It's not that like, oh, I'm playing against someone good, so I'm not going to be aggressive. Impact's point was that a better player shows you less opportunities to be aggressive because they don't give you the window, right? Caps doesn't just say, all right, the guy arrived in lane, time to like one-shot him. It's like Cap sees some window of like, oh, he stepped too far forward, or oh, he's like too far up in the wave, or oh, he spent his spell on the minions. Like whatever it is, there is something that triggers, yep, I win now, right? And these higher level players just show you that much less often. And when they do show it to you, it's a much smaller window they have to instantly go on. He also referenced a failed all-in he did top lane on Zeus, where he was saying, Jojo made the call, hey, I'm going to move up, like I'm coming. And so he's like, oh, I'll wait. But he said he had seen a window where he thought he could win the 1v1, but then because Jojo made the call, he was like, oh, I hesitated, and like I messed up. I should have said, I don't need you. I'm about to kill his ass, right? Yep. But because he waited, then he said the positioning was basically worse, and like he felt that caused him to lose the all-in. So it's like these tiny things, and I hope that EG can really kind of learn from that and just come in and like just play with confidence, right? And
Yeah.
if you lose, you lose. Everyone's expecting you to lose anyway, but like go out there and kind of give it your best shot.
That has been one thing that's been consistent across all the teams. Everyone has been talking about playing with confidence.
Yeah.
And even that Caps interview at the very beginning of the tournament, he was talking about how he just started playing League for fun again.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big reasons that we've seen Claps unleashed again on international stage. Is
What a cool player.
honestly, where you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to play for fun again. And then just start styling on literally every player in the world.
I'm just going to play for funsies and beat Faker. That sounds nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna play for funsies, go bot, and just dance around Xiaohu away on 2 highly mechanical chain, like for kicks. Why
Just for
not?
funsies, you
just
know.
for funsies.
Just queue up a little MSI.
But that's the difference from LEC regular season, where it's like,
That's a job.
that was exactly
That was his
a
9 to
job.
5. He's like, you know,
Slugging away.
Punching the
sorry.
time card.
Yeah, like I think that's probably how he felt about it. That's why you saw him come alive once there was a crowd again and big stakes again.
Yeah.
He punched a 9 to 5 for a while.
It's really hard to stay incredibly motivated for a long amount of years,
Absolutely.
right? And I don't blame players for that. You know, I think it's just the reality of like there's ebbs and flows of motivation. Discipline is what keeps people at the top for a really long time, not motivation, because motivation is fleeting. But you know, especially when you are a Caps, it's like, what do you think his biggest desire is, right? It's winning worlds, right?
Yeah.
And he's been to the world finals and he's had that experience and he's lost at it. It's hard to feel that same, I think, level of like drive and motivation, you know, about like week 7 of spring.
You're going back to square one.
Yeah.
Every single time.
You're waiting to the end of the year.
Requalifying every single time. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough spot to be in. He doesn't just get like seeded into quarterfinals like we used to do. You know what I mean? Like he has to
Ooh, that was a long
fight
time ago.
that was a long time. Throwback.
Well, and you have to wait a whole damn year.
You have to wait, yeah. You're in a whole damn year. You're here. No one expected him to be here. He's finally back on your stage. Obviously, a bit of a downturn, but did pop off at the start. And I think it's the same for a lot of these big veteran names who have found consistently domestic success. And it's like, we know that they learn more, that there's better competition for them internationally. And that is something that, like, that can never be changed. That will always be the case in League of Legends. And I think you're right. Like, the fact that veterans the people who keep coming back are the people who are, like, by far the most impressive to me. I would rate that over the people who like make it to a world final. I mean, maybe if we win a world final, I'll feel differently about that. But the people who make it to a world final once, then we never see them again. You know?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's just so hard to maintain that level of discipline. As far as predictions, I'm going with my head. It's a 3-0 or a 3-1 RNG. Like I think it's probably going to be dominant. I'm really hoping that I am wrong, and I can see the ways in which I could be wrong, and we talked a lot about those. But yeah, my prediction has to be like 3-0, 3-1 RNG.
Yeah, I just think it's too fraudulent to not predict that way. And if I was to just be like, yeah, I love EG gonna win, like it's so cheap.
Yeah.
To do a prediction like that, so I'm not going to do one either. And also
cheap if they win.
If the
Sure.
upset happens, it's made impactful and it's a meaningful upset because everyone's predicting it to not happen.
Yeah.
If everyone's throwing out that, I don't care. You know what?
Yeah, because I mean, and
It
again,
doesn't-
people really like are always like, oh, you're undercutting or you're undermining a team. And it's like, no, it's just like if EG win this series, there is nothing we can say here with any shred of evidence that would like really truly logically make sense in this
Except
moment
what
to
you
make the
said
prediction.
earlier about it being the next Faker and Uzi.
Yes,
on one team.
except what came out of my
Except
mouth
what
and not
stuff that
Isaac's
Daniel
mouth about
Drakos
Faker
earlier
and Uzi
said.
being goddamn. People aren't going to listen to the whole podcast. They're actually going to think I said that.
It was a good point. I like it.
Thank you. I was just putting words in my mouth. I appreciate you.
Who's going to be the next JoJo is really
Really the question. JoJo Jr.
We got to start looking. We got to start looking for the next
That's
JoJo.
Faker,
He's
actually.
gonna
Oh,
come
I
out.
Faker is
see.
JoJo.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
I don't know.
He was saying EG 3-0.
I was saying RNG 3-0.
Right.
It would be insane to see the upset. Would love to see it. Would love to
Fingers
see
crossed.
how they do it, but it's like a magic trick, you know.
Yeah.
Until I see it, until I see the behind, I'm never gonna understand how it would happen.
We've done the magic trick before. Team Liquid kicked out IG.
Team Liquid.
Yep.
The defending world champs.
That's true.
And then poof, they're
you're right.
They're out of the tournament, and we go.
And he's already beat Rookie. Why does he need to be
Impact
on the
was
list?
on that team at the time, right?
Holy shit! You're revealing too much of the magic trick. Okay,
Ooh, magicians hate him.
Calm down.
Let's talk about the other
T1.
side of the bracket.
G2.
T1 versus G2. This is not.
Okay.
This is, I will say off the bat, as the EU pundit, I feel like this is pretty solidly T1 favored.
Ooh, okay. So if we just went from the RNG EG, the more extreme to me semifinal, I feel like this one is way closer, way more doable.
Yes, absolutely, significantly closer. This is neither of
Have
these
you heard
teams
the
are
stat about Caps versus Faker? all
infallible.
time?
Yes, I'm less.
It was 9-3. Is it 9-4 now? Because they lost.
They lost the last one,
9-4.
so I'm pretty sure
So
it's
it's
9-4.
Okay, yeah.
So the thing is,
That's incredible,
In
by
order
the
for
way.
me to believe in G2, you basically, in my eyes, is what most people's arguments are going to be is that they have to get back to the form that we saw in the first few days, and they have to have that level of consistency. And that to me is rough to bet on because, like, I can tell you, like, oh, they just have to do that, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know what went wrong behind the scenes to lead them then to that falling down. And then when we talk about fallbacks, my fallback, like, really safe backup plan for G2 is always just put Broken Blade on Ornn because I don't think any other tank does the job that Ornn does, sadly, which means it's a pretty easy thing for any team to target, including T1.
Yeah.
And then play for a really clean team fight where it's very clear what Flakka needs to do, very clear what Targamas needs to do, and the team feels like it's set up for Flakka to succeed. Because oftentimes in the past, in the Aphelios meta, when G2 were on the downturn, it was like, yes, Flakka had Aphelios, but it was really hard for him to get in and play the team fight well when he didn't have that clear front line to play behind.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of why he's had so much success with the Kai'Sa at this turn, because the Kai'Sa, you're always drafting that way with the rest of your team. You know, you're always getting frontline and big CC to be able to apply plasma. And so that's why he's only lost one single game on Kai'Sa, with it being his most played. And I think like that has been the most successful iteration, I feel like, of their drafts. One thing I definitely would like them to avoid is something Broken Blade specific is the Gangplank. In North America, he was probably the least scary Gangplank that we had. I don't feel like that has changed too much since then. I know it's a champion that he'll always be like, yeah, I can play anything or whatever, but it is so different from the other structure that they need. I feel like for him to be a frontline, and I don't want to see like the tank Gangplank type of build anyway. If you're gonna pick the champ, go for the crit, I think.
And I'm curious to see, because we're both now regions that have had a lot of experience with Broken Blade, so I think he's an interesting player to follow. I think, to me, my impression of G2 this season has been Broken Blade's got this fatty champion pool, and he'll use it in draft to get laning advantages. But to me, for the most part, the Broken Blade niche picks, whether it's the Corki counter pick into the GP, which did win the game despite a difficult laning phase, the Yone into Graves top, I believe was when he pulled that out, the Riven that he played.
The Aatrox.
The Aatrox feels a little bit more like, not mainstream, but it's like in the realm of reasonable, right? It just never feels worth it to me for what it costs the rest of the map. Like, yes, BB's doing solid. Even in the Vladimir game where G2 were starting to fall behind, he was like off on the side of the map, he was just perma-farming, and it just feels like even if Broken Blade does well on those champions, he is not like the shy level of 1v4 in the game that I think you need to for the amount that it takes up space from other players. And maybe like if Flakka is a different player, maybe that's a different story. I don't want to put more pressure on Flakka than necessary, but like I always want to see Broken Blade on something that is just rock solid, reliable. And if I get to choose, and this is a meme at this point, the Ornn, because it's just, to me, it's like he's always relevant, he's always reliable, he does well in lanes that he's supposed to do well.
Don't need resources.
He loses gracefully.
He has 21 games all time on it, and it's a 76.2% win rate. That is massive.
Yeah, and it's just also, I think, the best tank that will ever exist in League of Legends until they fundamentally change him, because that champion's disgusting.
The win rates for his top 5 champions, it stands out like a sore thumb here. It is absolutely insane, the success.
Yeah.
That he's had with
his most played is 48% win rate on Aatrox, and then 76%.
And then you're like, that Ornn's looking great.
Yeah, and again, I think he's good at other
really
champions.
Good win rate on Aurelia, to be fair. His 5th most played, 72%.
Because that's also
his Vladimir, also really good win rate.
Yeah,
71%.
Aurelia's also, they always invest so much for draft for counter pick. With
yeah, it's very situational for sure.
Yeah,
it's really interesting because like it's easier for me to think about how G2 just like wins the series, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to look that far back, right? When they were playing super well.
Sure, yeah.
My big concern is not that G2 looked really bad in those 5 games, because like I'm gonna be honest, they did, right? Whether people want to like paint over it and say,
I do not.
They're just like, I just on social and stuff, you see some people, they're just having some fun games.
They're gonna be great for best of 5s. Like, yeah, maybe, but just as likely that they're gonna be terrible for best of 5s.
And I mean, my biggest concern is that, like in the way when you pick something new and you play a different style, and then people are like, gotta watch out for that and draft. It makes you harder to actually draft against. I think their struggles made them a lot easier to draft against. And that is my concern, is because we're not the only ones saying pick Ornn and Kai'Sa. Everyone is saying this. Everyone is thinking this, right?
Yep.
And so that is my concern for G2 really coming into this, is that T1 has the same read as everyone else, and then G2 are forced to really show a different way to play it, right? Because Flakked was an absolute beast on the Kai'Sa. Everyone saw it. He should never be allowed to play Kai'Sa in this series. It should be taken away or banned, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The Kalista didn't look as good. He had some good Ezreal games, but it's like it was so far and away his best champion. I think G2, when they are playing team fight, that looked really dominant. Caps and Jankos, they need to have some agency, right? Like, is Caps a good Corki player? Yes, I do believe he is. Does G2 look the same when he's playing, Corki? No, not even close, right? Like, because he doesn't have the agency to actually make these plays and find these aggressive angles. Even if it is going to be, Jankos on like a Poppy or something that's like less early game, when he is paired with the Caps LeBlanc or Zoe or whatever, they can still make things happen. And they show that a lot when Jankos is playing Graves and getting these 3-camp blue buff ganks mid, because Caps is setting him up for it and he's doing creative pathing and timings that they're not expecting. But when you pair something that doesn't have like a lot of gank potential with something that is pretty passive, G2 really, I think, are out of sorts, because generally speaking, those are the guys that are going to create action for them early game, right? So I do think if I'm T1, I'm taking away, the best team fighting marksman, for Flakked. I'm not letting him get Kai'Sa. I'm trying to keep Broken Blade off of Ornn, right? Or if you're going to go Ornn, you're like picking counters into it and things like that. And then you're trying to draft really strong mid-jungle 2v2 and limit like Caps in what he can play proactively. Because I think like we've seen clearly that is the best way for G2 to play. And now they have to be able to show like, hey, they have the other things. Like Caps has the champion pool, Broken Blade has the champion pool, but if you're going for really creative picks, it can be at the expense, not just of what resources for other players like you were talking about, but also at the expense of your team comp, right? Yep. And I think that is something that they're really going to have to be hyper aware of. Like how do they build a comp with the champions that they're going to be given that is going to be successful consistently?
No,
I think as long as they avoid some of these pitfalls, and to me too, their loss versus T1 was one of the worst drafts that they possibly had. It's the squishiest overall draft that they've ever drafted here at MSI. That was the one
21-minute game.
It was the one with the gangplank. They got outplayed all over. So obviously it's not a draft when there's just a 21-minute game. There's also a lot of outplay there, but I think this is kind of a healthy loss to have in the Rumble stage, because that should be such clear evidence for them, and to direct them in their best of 5 drafting, where their drafting has been so good. So I don't think they need like a lot of those examples to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
That's at least like glass half full.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me when we look back at their history, and I don't want to completely rewrite history because G2's 12-0 run through the losers bracket and ultimately to win our championship was really good. But one of the things that they did well was not crazy out of nowhere drafts. They were really good with Jarvan. They were really good with Ahri, and other people did not respect the pick enough. And Broken Blade was the first person in our region to really, truly abuse Ornn. And the thing is, talking to the teams that played against them, most of their regrets are around not banning a Jarvan or not banning an Ahri. And all of those picks got picked over and over and over and over again. And here we see they've got some niche drafts too. But now that they're figured out, I wonder how much of G2's historical success is just because they got away, because they were slightly ahead of everyone else and finding a pick was relevant, you know? But I think a lot of the things that if different drafts in playoffs make G2, I think would have made G2 struggle a lot more. Yes, Caps was an absolute god. Yes, Caps has had his absolute god moments in this. And I'm afraid because I don't think that RNG, T1, any of these teams is going to look at a game where they lose in a best of 5. And I think T1 will lose a game in this best of 5. And while they're favored, I'll still probably predict G2 because I'm not going to do I have to hold on to hope. If they find that thing, they find that one thing They will not get that one thing a second time or a third time the way they did in so many of these EU playoff matches. I mean, the amount of times that they got 2 of those 3 champions in draft that literally won them the games, just those champions on their own. And yes, other people contributed, blah, 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 is outstanding domestically. And I just don't think something like that will ever happen internationally.
I think agnostic of power picks, though, if they focus on, okay, some of my goals in draft are to get Caps, Jankos, mid jungle winning 2v2. Like that, like isolate that and play into the 2v2 into owner faker. I think if that is one of your goals, and then rounding out the rest of the team comp kind of as like step 2 to that, to me, that feels like the best strategy for this team. Because when you bring in Broken Blade, Flakked later into the game, and presumably Broken Blade, big front line, some sort of CC, Flakked, AD carry damage for the team fight.
Yeah.
But you let Jankos, Caps, and Targamas control the early and give them kind of that preference in your pick ban. To me, that feels like the most G2, the most clear cut, and why Caps has styled on so many people here, and why Jankos has stepped up with him. If you prioritize those two, to me, that feels like how you beat T1. And I would actually, I think I'm probably going to predict G2. Honestly,
Caps is a better laner than Faker right now as well. Like
absolutely.
It's not
which
like
is why you want to force that 2v2 in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, he doesn't. It's not like he could like only win if he gets a cheese pick mid. Like he's just a better laner than Faker, I think.
Yeah.
So if you're getting him a winning 2v2 and you have the lane advantage, like that is a real way in. And while I talked about we talked about the Kaisa and stuff for Flakked as a clear thing. I also think that Gumayushi has been like pretty underwhelming. We mentioned earlier, like Dade Award and everything. So it'll be interesting to see like where he is going to go as far as picks, because he did revert back to some different stuff, right? Like in the G2 T1 game, he played Aphelios and actually looked good. In the final game against RNG, he was playing Azael, like crit scaling marksman, right? So some of these picks that are like kind of popular now didn't look as good for him. So it'll be interesting to see like if G2 can equally kind of try to attack that. I definitely think by far my biggest concern is just top lane. Like I think Zeus has been the best performing top laner here, and it's not close. I think he is really, really terrifying, and he plays very well with Owner. I think Jankos and Broken Blade don't play nearly as well together. Like Jankos, I think he makes stuff happen up there, but like Jankos and Caps are the duo. Like they're the ones that are generally feel like kind of the dynamic duo for a G2, and always feel so well coordinated. I don't necessarily feel it works as well when he's playing towards Broken Blade, especially like back in the regular season and in some of their struggles. I don't think things were working well up there. So that's my biggest concern for G2. But I mean, I think this is like a much more winnable series. I think T1 is worse than RNG, and G2 is like a very creative team. But I mean, if they come into this series and they play like they did in that 5-game loss streak, like they're going to get pounded. It's not going to be close. Like they need to play like we know they can play. They need to play at a high level to be competitive, because T1 did get better. Like as much as there's a lot of shakiness to point to, the last handful of games from T1 looked really good, and their game against RNG at the end was the best game that they played, and their second game that they played against G2 was probably the second best game that they played, right? Like they played some good games.
And highlighting again that the T1 jersey hides so many of the things that we think about when we think about any other team, because they're T1 players. But again, you highlighted already, Zeus is still a kid, like he's had an amazing.
I mean, the whole team except for Faker
is a kid. Yeah. So you know what I mean? So like and they're playing in front of their home crowd in a big international event, and it's high stakes. So I think it's reasonable to have those nerves. The only thing I truly want from this series as a spectator is peak form for both teams, because this feels like a series that will just be decided by who is in form. And as long as they're both in form, we suddenly have a much more interesting conversation where, it's like topside versus mid jungle, I feel like. But it's just so much of it feels to me rooted in the intangible of like who recovers better over a 2-day period.
I literally think if G1 win the first game, I think they were going to win the series.
I feel like G2 will...
G2. G1.
G2?
If G1 win G1.
G1. I said G1. I was like, what? I assumed you meant T1.
No, it evolves with the series.
It's
G1, G2.
They're melding.
Yeah, I mean, I think my prediction...
I did the same thing. I called G2 GG in the EG G2 game.
GG!
Yeah.
I think it's if G2 are going to win, it's going to be a 3-0. Maybe a 3-1, because historically G2 are the 3-1 team. but I'm gonna say G2 3-0.
Oh man, you just said you want both teams peak level, and then
If
you
G2 are gonna win, they're gonna have something spicy up their sleeve, and it's gonna be unstoppable.
Did he not start out this
saying
section?
T1 is heavily favored?
did.
G2
I said
3-0.
favored. They're favored.
You
Not
said heavily favored.
Oh, did I? Well, yeah,
heavily G2. T1 is heavily favored against G2. I predict G2 will win 3-0.
guys.
Our arguments were so convincing for G2.
Yeah, this is a credit to
He's like,
yourself.
you know what?
You're right.
So I will say, if we do get peak level from both teams, I think T1 wins pretty hard. I believe that. I do think that T1's bot lane is like massively better at the peak. Right?
But Guma said himself, he's at 20%, and that 20% to me has maybe gone to 30% towards the end games, and that's it.
I'm just saying, like, if they play at peak level, but there's lots of stuff that you can point to. I mean, for G2 had some of the absolute worst games of the whole event in their 5-game loss streak, but T1 also had, like, objectively the worst Barons probably of any team here. Like, their Barons were so troll, and a lot of their Heralds were so troll. So it's like, we don't know what level of form we're going to see, which I think makes it so hard to predict, right? If your prediction for like a 3-0 is, I think you're going to see the T1 where they're trolling at Baron, and we're going to see the G2 where they're on this huge winning streak and like they're playing top level, then like I think that's totally justifiable. But I
think my
3-0 feels very optimistic to me.
3-0 to me is not like a representation that the game. I just feel like
that feels like peak G2 and T1's playing like shit.
If G2 are going to win this, they're going to smash it, and if it's anything else, I feel like it's so hard to say. But that's it. I think if G2 are going to win this, they're going to smash it, and I believe that G2 are going to win this. And I think it does rely on some picks that we haven't seen yet and some decisions in draft, either that maybe from T1 that we haven't seen yet, like leaving Ornn open, or some stuff from G2. And I think that I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I think Dylan has proven himself to be a good coach with good prep, and they will get back to that form.
Yeah.
But
I'm just giving Caps the benefit of the doubt. This man... They always beat LCK. I just feel like.
But that's the sad
get your
thing.
mid jungle, get him secure, get Caps the tools, and I think it's gonna happen.
I think it's a good point, Kobe.
It's really interesting. I mean, this one is, I feel, really hard to predict because both teams were so up and down. Yeah. Right. Like it's really like your prediction is just based on which you think will show up. Right. Yeah. And I do think if you get absolute peak of both teams, T1 wins. I think
that's true.
I think that.
I've been baited by how bad Guma has been, because that's you forget how OP Guma carrier are.
So by far the best bot lane in the world, right? Yeah. Like this isn't a knock on Flacket and Targamas. This is like them versus everyone else in the whole world. They looked way better. Like they were styling on Ruler and stuff, right? Like, so I do think that is true. I do think if G2 is playing at like their win streak level and T1 is kind of trolling around objectives, they're going to get punished. And I do think straight up Caps is better than Faker, right? Like I think that is true. Like right now he's just better than Faker. And like I'm fully on board with that. But I do think Zeus is a big advantage over Broken Blade. And I do think if T1 bot lane like is kind of ramping up like it felt like they were when I look at the last two big games for them, the G2 game and the RNG game, Guma played much better in those. If he comes in at a high level, I favor T1, and I think Zeus is favored over Broken Blade as well. So it's like it's got to be Caps and Yankos, I think, right? It's got to be them making the big difference, and their side lane's not getting blown out. I'm on the T1 side for sure. I think it's like maybe like a 3-1 for T1, but I wouldn't be shocked if G2 won at all.
This is a closer one.
It's just really hard to predict.
This is not the miracle, and again, depending on the context of the game, but this is again, if in contrast to what would be an EG upset win, let's say, this is not a miracle. Like this one can clearly just go either way.
And 3-1 sounds like, I know if you guys are both on G2, 3-1 maybe sounds like like this guy really loves T1, but like I feel like T1 is ramping up, and that is. I just
don't think that series like. The problem is that when you hear 3-1, 3-2, you're like, oh, that means it's going to be like a 3-0 can still be close. You can like
3 close games, but you lose them all.
3 close games, but you lose them all, and that's the problem.
Exactly. 6-0 can also be.
It's like
really
I
close.
believe that these teams are neck and neck, but this team does this thing better. It's going to be a 3-0. That's the problem. It's like 3-2 is just the like these teams are really close. Like that's why the only thing I hate about best of 5 predictions is it's not really like
yeah. I mean the length of your prediction isn't indicative of how close it is going to be, because I think it's going to be a short series either way. Either team wins.
But both are on G2 side?
Because of I'm predicting G2. I thought I already predicted G2.
Yeah. Can you give a number, like a 3 whatever, but 3-1. Then give me a percentage. Give me like a 60-40, 45-55. Because that feels...
The percentage is way closer. I would give it like 57% G2.
Yeah, and see, that's way more indicative of how you feel about this matchup than you saying 3-0. And I think so. That's the value, because like you say
I say
3-1,
but I'm like
but
a 60-40 on T1
yeah,
probably.
and I think I'm not even. You're more than I am. I think I'm like 55-45.
55-45 3-0.
Yeah, but that's just the nature of how
I
G2
know.
play as a team. But that's the point,
He
right?
just
That's
gave a whole explanation.
why we should use percentages instead of like the match score.
Yeah.
Because it's
I just
not,
loved your whole spiel. You know, it's really true. It's not how many games you lose, it's how close they are. You know, that 6-0? What is a 6-0 really?
My favorite part was just
extremely competitive.
My favorite part was the
And
start.
the 6-0 is just not indicative in any way. So it's really a great point. I've loved your points in this one.
Thank you. Did you like my one about Uzi and Faker?
I did.
On the same
that one,
team about
Uzi and
EG?
Faker for EG. Like I love that point. And now really hammering it home with the fact that the 6-0 from G2 over EG didn't mean anything, and I couldn't agree more.
And the 9-0 won't mean anything either. Finals,
if we get 9-0, it means we're making finals. I'll take it.
Yeah. The price
what are
is
the
beating RNG.
What are the percentages that go along with this 9-0?
It's 51-49 for the 9-0.
Yeah, for the 9-0.
It's like a really close 9-0.
It's a really close 9-0.
It's a 50-50 9-0.
Yeah. I'll give you 51-49.
I'll take 50.
It's the best I could do.
Well,
Best I can do for the 9-0.
Yeah.
Because they're already 6, so it's like they're pretty kind of close. You know?
Ignore the previous coin
back to the
flips.
jar
We're back to flipping.
We're back to the jar. They're getting tired.
Yeah. That's what you're gonna say if G2 beat T1. You're like, look, we weakened them. We weakened them with our
Exactly.
victory. Now you're reaping the rewards.
Yep.
It's cool. We would have said the same thing with RNG.
Yep.
Works out. Friday is. Well, let me check the schedule.
Friday is EG RNG. Saturday is T1 G2.
Sick. Finals.
Sunday
TBD.
is EG G2.
Sunday is EGG2, as it was meant to be.
51-49 on the 9-0.
51-49 on the 9-0.
Yeah.
Just to complete it, because who doesn't love a bit of tournament narrative? It's just destined. We've called it now. We haven't cursed it at all.
Nope.
It's going to happen.
We'll see you there.
So NAEU fans, we'll see you there.
Yeah.
LCK, LPL fans, you're welcome to watch us lift the trophy on Sunday.
Yeah, you can watch too.
You can come hang out if you want.
That's cool.
You can root for either side. You know, we're not going to judge. And we won't give you a hard time about it.
I feel like we could use more of the fan vote though, seeing as everyone in North America is asleep during the broadcast.
Okay.
Also,
you
so-
can have the China fan base, and we'll take the Korea fan base maybe.
We have more.
Okay.
We have more
That feels balanced.
LCK and LPL players than you do.
True.
So I feel like we.
Oh, I see. The real reason
Melting
those imports
pot.
have been coming through. Okay, yeah, fair. All right, boys.
Yeah, I mean, we have Uzi in the bot lane
Deal.
and Impact in the top lane.
It's a deal. Shake on it.
Yeah, shake on it. I'll see you guys
We
in the
got
finals.
Uzi and
See you in
Faker.
the finals.
Why would you not cheer for us?
Yep. Okay, Uzi and
Yeah,
Faker
yeah.
for EG. All right, that's going to be Divephoria episode 3.
Banger.
Tune in. 3 final days of MSI. 3 back-to-back best of 5s.
Last episode.
It's going to be absolutely incredible. Yeah, this is the last time we'll get to talk on a podcast together.
Farewell.
I'll miss you. Enjoy the dive.
Also, I'm not talking to you in real life after this either.
This is it. We're done.
Yeah, this is it.
Oh shit! An awkward breakup. But then,
What are your last words?
my last words.
Is there like a final meal where you guys kind of like awkwardly eat in silence? You know?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, actually, that sounds good too.
I'm hungry.
I'm
I
hungry.
haven't had breakfast yet.
We should
damn.
decide what
I
we're
could
gonna
eat.
get now because we're not going to talk later.
Well, we gotta go do laundry. Spoiler, adult
Yeah.
things.
I have some
sure.
undies to clean.
Nothing like a long international trip. You can't say anything after
Guys,
your...
there's so many good follow-ups to that. Oh my God, let's end the show.
Remember, in the
Socks,
wise
too.
words of Kobe, Orn could wipe his ass with a 10 minion CS deficit and then forge it into an item for his teammates.
True.
Yeah. Think about that while you ponder when you're gonna tune in.
Think about that while you enter draft. G2.
Think about that. Anyway, this has been Dive 4 episode 3. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next tournament. Check out the dive in Euphoria as our seasons resume. And yeah, later. Bye.
Bye.